Hello, class. I hope that you've had a wonderful day so far. Now, I am excited to be talking about this. This is one of the biggest topics and probably one of the most well-known topics about Oklahoma. Okay, the five civilized tribes, where you might have heard the Trail of Tears. We're going to break this down and look at each one of these tribes, what classifies them as a civilized tribe, how do they impact Oklahoma, what all does this whole thing look like, okay? And so one thing that we see is that within our world there is sin. We know this. We see this in scripture. We even see this in today's world, with all the riots and violence and all that. We see that the world is made up of sinners. However, there is good. God is good. And so we see that there are times where there will be evil, there will be sin, because we're sinners. We are not perfect. We are naturally going to sin, but we turn to God, good things will happen. Okay, and so we're going to break down how each of these tribes are going to be impacted, how the evil and how the bad things are going to impact them. And ultimately, we'll look at later this week and next week how there will be good aspects that come from this. Eventually, not originally, but eventually, good things will happen because of God and nothing else. And so I got to ask you a question. How will the U.S. presidents deal with the Native Americans? All right, so we looked at what are the things that happen to the Native Americans. There were three things. What are the ways that Native Americans are going to be treated by presidents? Caleb, what is one of them? Okay, good. Violence. Cademan, what's another one? All right, peace. And the third one, can anyone tell me what the third one is? It's similar to one of the ones that were just listed. Okay, that's okay. I can see that. Okay, try to get them to trade or entice them to leave. Okay, so we're going to look at these three and how the presidents are going to interact with them. Well, President Thomas Jefferson is going to be the first one to really interact with the Native Americans. What did he end up purchasing? We talked about this a long time ago. What did he purchase? Chase? That's right. The Louisiana Purchase, the Louisiana Territory. And so with this, we acquired not only a large amount of land, but there were a lot of Native American tribes in there. Okay, and now we have to figure out ways how to deal with them, how to interact with them, what to do to make our world, to make North America great. And so Thomas Jefferson is going to believe that if he could civilize the Native Americans, they could become part of white society. They could fit into what we're doing. They could fit into what we're teaching about, how they could become as citizens, they could vote, they could own property, they could just become part of us. That's what he's thinking. Well, he is dealing with so much that he will not implement this a great deal. And so what he will do is the next presidents after him, President Monroe and President John Quincy Adams, are going to deal with the Native Americans in a different viewpoint. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try to entice the Native Americans to move out west. All right, so what does entice mean? Can anyone tell me? Tate, what does entice mean? Ooh, not Not really that. Allison, what does entice mean? Correct. It's almost like bribe. Okay, it's almost like when my son steals my phone, I'm going to try to find something that I can bribe him with to get my phone back. It's the same thing. Monroe and Quincy Adams think, hey, if we give them good land out west, if we can give them supplies, weapons, money, maybe they'll leave. Maybe they'll want to take this and leave their old land behind. That's what they're thinking. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to define what it takes to be considered a civilized tribe. How, because there's dozens and maybe even hundreds of tribes. How are they classified as civilized or not civilized? And so there are 5 things that they're going to be looked at. First off, they had to have manners. They had to act like Americans. They had to treat people with civility. They had to interact with people a certain way. They had to hold themselves in a certain way. They had to have manners. They had to be respectful. And the second thing is they had to have a leader, okay, someone that was the voice of their tribe, that was guiding them and directing them. They couldn't just have, do whatever they want whenever they want, because then that just leads to anarchy. Just look at Seattle right now. There's not a leader there telling them what to do or guiding them. Okay, everyone's just doing whatever they want. Okay, there's no manners. There's no leader guiding them. And so you have to have someone guiding them and directing them. The third thing is they had to live in log cabins with a street system. All right, so why is this one important to being a civilized tribe? Hannah Spurgeon? Why is number 3 important? Okay, I like that. Ace, can you help her out? That's right. Okay. If they're stationary, if they're living in one place for their entire life, then they will take care of the land better. They will want to thrive and grow. If they're moving around one place to another every couple weeks or every couple months, then they won't take care of the land as well. They won't be as civilized. They won't be as easy to work with other people. And so that is crucial. So we have these cabins, we have these huts. If they become stationary and they live in a place for a period of time for their entire lives, then they will become civilized. They will become more like the white society. All right, the last 2 things is that they needed to have a sewer system. They can't just throw their waste out in the road or out in their neighbor's backyard. They needed something to help clean their system. They needed to be able to take care of their homes. They had to maintain a clean environment. That's what we're wanting. We're wanting them to take care of what they have. And then the last thing is that they had to have a form of government. Why do they need a form of government? I talked about it a little bit ago. It's because man is evil. We needed a government that would be able to allow for freedom, but also provide justice, that would control the evil of man through biblical principles. And so if they had a government, they were wanting to become civilized. They were wanting to become, governed and take care of themselves and be able to work with others and care about others and love on others. And so with these were important elements to become classified as civilized tribes. However, even though the Cherokee, Choctaw, the Creek, or another name is Muskogee. The Chickasaw and Seminole were classified as civilized and were considered great Native American tribes. Not all leaders and not all presidents cared about what they thought, didn't care if they were civilized or not, because they were an obstacle to their government. They were an obstacle to their power, to helping the American people flourish. And so Andrew Jackson is going to go about the Native American tribes differently than everyone else. He is going to be a general, and he will eventually become president. And so he's going to decide to take on these Native Americans in a different way. Okay, we had talked about it last week. What does he decide to do compared to the previous presidents we talked about? Yeah, he's going to use violence. He's going to use the military. He is a general. He'd been in the military for like 20 years, 30 years at this point. And so he is going to prefer a military action than diplomacy. And so what he's going to do is that in 1830, he's going to have Congress pass the Indian Removal Act. Jackson, as president, could not create a bill or cannot create an act, but Congress could. And so Congress is going to create something called the Indian Removal Act, which will create the Trail of Tears. And so there's going to be 4 things that fall within the Indian Removal Act. First one is that they abolish tribal government. Why is abolishing tribal government important? Genesis? Correct. If you get rid of their government, they cannot control themselves. We are saying, hey, you don't have the power to control yourselves, so we have to control you. You can't take care of yourself. You're like little children. You have to have someone taking care of you. Your government does not work. Our government works. You have to obey our laws, not your laws, our laws. And so that ties into the second part of it. Indians are not accepted as competent witnesses. We're saying they're children. They can't think for themselves. They can't take care of themselves. They can't testify in court because they do not know what's right for them. We have to take care of them. We have to do what's best for them. And so with that, we need to not allow them to testify in court because they don't know what's best for them. They don't know what's good for them. And so the third thing is that white men had to have permits to be on Cherokee land. So in order to move onto lands or to interact with the Native Americans, first off, you had to purchase a permit from the U.S. government. And in order to do this, you had to go through some hoops and all that. And so this was to almost in good faith show them, hey, we want to take care of you. We want to be on your good side. You know, we're not going to be as bad when we're getting rid of you. However, the fourth point is the biggest part of the Indian Removal Act. When we take away their lands, the best lands were given up for lottery from all the tribes. Okay, why is this crucial? Why did Andrew Jackson want this? That's right, LaBelle. He wanted the best lands. He wanted to take some of their lands as well. Some of the lands had oil and gold and coal on it, which we were using all of it. And so we want Jackson is going to take their land so he can have some as well and give some to his buddies. And so we see that this is going to be a difficult time for the 5 civilized tribes. These tribes are going to be forced off their lands because Jackson was tired of dealing with them. He wanted to use them to get to their lands. And so we see that what we're going to see is that he's going to deal with each Native American tribe a little bit differently. Now they're going to have a lot of similarities, but there's going to be some minor differences between all of them and how the Native Americans react. And so what we see is that the Choctaw Indians are going to be led by a man by the name of Pushmata. Pushmata is going to be known as the father of the Choctaws. He's going to be their leader, their guide. He's going to be the one that takes care of their tribe. And so Andrew Jackson is general. He's not president yet. He's working and campaigning to become president. And so he is going to be negotiating with the Native Americans. He's trying to force them to be the first tribe to move to Indian territory. Well, Pushmata is pretty bright. He knows what Andrew Jackson wants, and he knows what the U.S. government wants, and he does not want to give in to them. He wants to stay on his lands. He doesn't want to move out of his home. The government doesn't want to pay them that much, doesn't want to give them that much. They are trying to cheap them out, give them as cheap amount of deal as possible. And so Pushmata is like, nope, heck no. You got to give me more. Nope, we're not going to do that. Nope, not going to agree to that. He's going to make negotiations as hard as possible for General Andrew Jackson. What Jackson wants and what the U.S. government wants is they want all tribal territory. Everything that Choctaw Indians have, they want it. And so it'll be extremely difficult. General Jackson will say this, then Pushmata will counter and say, nope, won't do that, we'll do this. And so they will eventually come to an agreement where Pushmata will give up some of the lands, not all of them. Okay? He won't agree to the full deal, but he will give up some of his lands in order for money and weapons and supplies and stuff like that. And so this is the agreement that Jackson and Pushmata will come to. Well, that agreement will eventually come to an end when what happens? What causes this agreement to end? JD, what do you think happens? Okay, I like that answer. Okay. Anyone else have an idea? Dalen, what you got? All right, good. Well, all that ties in, but what ultimately causes this negotiation to end is that Pushmata dies. As leader of the tribe, when he dies, Jackson sees his opportunity. He's going to go in and he's going to create a new agreement with the new chief. He's going to come in and be like, well, this agreement was with Pushmata, not with you. And so this new agreement is going to be, you are going to give me all lands east of the Mississippi River. You're going to give me everything that Choctaw has, and you're going to move to Indian territory. If you don't give me everything that you have, guess what'll happen? I will call in my army. Yeah. He's the general. He's going to do whatever he wants. He's like, hey, I will come in by force one way or another. So you either give me everything peacefully and take this money and take this land and all that, or we force you out and you get nothing. And so the Choctaws, even though they don't want to leave, realize they have to. They are outnumbered and outgunned. They have to leave. And so they will sign the new agreement and they will travel from their land to Indian territory. And they will travel across all the lands to Oklahoma to Indian territory between 1831 and 1833. Okay, they will have their Trail of Tears. Each tribe will have their own Trail of Tears. So the Choctaw Trail of Tears will be from 1831 to 1833. They will travel, they will take all their supplies, and they will be one of the first tribes over in the new territory. Well, now that Andrew Jackson has successfully defeated one tribe, he's going to move on and try to do this to as many tribes as possible. And so what he's going to do is he's going to come into contact with the Creek Indians. The Creek Indians, they were feeling pressure from the U.S. government, state of Georgia, state of Alabama, and then the white settlers, the white families that were surrounding them. Everyone's saying, hey, you got to move. I want your land, and you're in the way. You better move, or I'm going to take it away. Yeah. All right, that's what's happening. And so right here, this man, William McIntosh, is one of two chiefs. Okay, so how the Creeks have it, they have a dual chief. Okay, they have dual meaning two. They have two chiefs that runs their tribe. William McIntosh is one, and then Ophelioho is the other. Okay, and they both have opposing views about the matter. Well, William McIntosh is, I wouldn't say he's smarter, but he can see a little bit more into the future than Ophelioho. Okay, McIntosh studied and heard and read what happened to the Choctaw Indians. He saw that Andrew Jackson did whatever he wanted with them. He came in and forced them out and took all their land away. And so he sees what's coming. He sees that Jackson is gunning for them. And so what he wants to do is he wants to trade their lands in Georgia and Alabama for new lands in Indiana territory. He wants to cut a deal. He wants to find a way to benefit his tribe. Well, Mr. Ophelioho, okay, or Mr. O, because I always say his name wrong, is on the other side. He does not agree with McIntosh. He believes McIntosh is making the wrong move. And so the Creeks are going to be divided between their two leaders. The McIntosh Creeks are going to be led by William McIntosh, and then the Upper Creeks are going to be led by Ophelioho, or Mr. O. And so we see that these two groups within the Creek tribe, are going to be butting heads on what to do, what not to do. Should we stay and fight? Should we try to go to court? Should we just trade our lands away? And so what happens is that McIntosh and some of his friends that were assistant leaders that helped make decisions for their tribe are going to sign away their lands. Going to sign all the lands away for the Creeks because they see what done. They know that Jackson is trouble and they don't want to wait. Well, Ophelioho hates this. He does not like what McIntosh did. And so he is going to become extremely upset that he's going to react a little bit poorly, and he's going to do what towards William McIntosh and the other leaders that signed that treaty? Can anyone tell me? Jace? He's going to kill them. He's going to just slaughter them. I mean, he's going to be furious because he thinks that McIntosh and the other McIntosh leaders betrayed the Creek Indians. They signed away their lands. They did it without half of the tribe's consent. Just saying, hey, yeah, do whatever you want. No, they are upset. And so they're going to brutally kill William McIntosh and several of his family members and leaders. However, this dark action didn't do any good. Revenge is never the solution. And so with his death, it still didn't change anything. Jackson didn't care. They had already signed the treaty in 1826. Jackson didn't care that half of the Creek tribe didn't want to move. He just wanted their land. He wanted them gone. Revenge is never the answer. Evil does not pay evil. Okay, we see this. And so once the treaty signed, McIntosh is dead. Ophelio is the only leader currently. Now, yes, there are still some McIntosh Creeks, but they don't have a leader right now. And so what's going to happen is that Jackson's going to give them two options. The first one is to give up lands and move to Indian Territory. The second option is to give up lands and stay in Georgia and join white society. Katen, what do these two have in common? What do these two options have in common? That's right. They have to give up their lands no matter what. They can either give up their lands, move out to a new territory, or give up their lands and join white society. Doesn't matter what they want. They have to give up their lands because that's what Jackson wants. Jackson wants their lands. And so the two groups are going to be split. The McIntosh Creeks, what's left of them, are going to move out to Indian Territory. They're going to give up their lands and they're going to move. The Upper Creeks, led by Mr. Ophelio, are going to stay in Georgia and Alabama. They're going to give up their lands and stay in Georgia and Alabama. What they're thinking is that maybe once Jackson dies or maybe when a new president comes in, maybe we can get back our lands. I mean, that's not the case, we know, in history, but that's what they're thinking at the time. Well, that's not the only bad things. That's not the only evil that happens. Something else extremely problematic is going to happen. They're going to be sent on their Trail of Tears in 1836 and 1837. And it's winter. I mean, it's one of the harshest winters in several decades. And these Creek Indians that are moving from Georgia and Alabama to Indian Territory don't have winter clothes, don't have enough supplies, don't have enough food. And so they're going to starve to death. They're going to freeze to death. Well, to make matters worse, I thought that was already problematic. To make matters worse is that one of the steamboats that was moving Creek Indians up the Mississippi River so they could cross the river faster sinks with hundreds of women and children on board. And so this is a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that these Creek Indians are having to go through. They are going through a difficult storm. They are hitting a low point in their nation's history. This is not a good time for them. They are having trouble. They are not seeing the light. They can't see the light. And so we will eventually help them. We will eventually share the word of God with them. But not right at this point, they're not hearing the word of God yet. They will soon, but right now they are just suffering. And so that is the Creek Nation. That is the Creek Indians. Well, we move into probably the most well-known Native American tribe in history, and that is the Cherokee Indians. So their fearless leader right now is a man by the name of Sequoyah. Sequoyah, he's a famed leader, and he's going to create something called the Cherokee Syllabary. He knows that if we can create more commonality, if we can look more like white society, maybe they'll leave us alone. That's what he's thinking. And so he's going to create something called a syllabary. Sienna, what is a syllabary? Aha, correct. It's their alphabet. He's going to create an alphabet for the Native Americans. For I guess specifically for the Cherokee. They hadn't been able to write down their history, take notes, write down literature. They've been saying everything by word of mouth. And so now they can keep their history. Now they can write down their laws, their government. And so Sequoyah, he had no intention of leaving. No plans of moving westward. None. I hate you, Jackson. That's what he's thinking. He thinks that if they can stay in Indian territory, in their homelands, they can look like the U.S., maybe they'll be left alone. And so what he's going to do is he's going to convince the U.S. to order whites off Cherokee lands, to leave them alone. He's going to try to mimic the U.S. as much as possible. What else can he do to mimic the U.S., you may ask? Well, what he can do is he will create a constitution and a 3-government branch. What does that sound like? That's right, Abigail. It's just like the U.S. government and the U.S. Constitution. Sequoyah is a brilliant man. He's going to rewrite the U.S. Constitution, and he's going to create a Cherokee Constitution out of it. He's going to take a lot of similarities, a lot of the same principles, the same government, but he's going to put it into Cherokee format. He is brilliant for doing this. However, just because he does this doesn't mean that it'll work. What we see is that he wants to work with the U.S. He's fine with trading, with working with them and all that, but he does not want to become part of it. However, that's not what Georgia wants. Georgia does not care about their constitution, doesn't care about their alphabet, doesn't care about their government, doesn't care about the people, the Cherokee people. They care about their land. The Cherokee are sitting on some of the greatest land in Georgia, sitting on some oil, some coal, some gold. They're sitting on some of the greatest land in that state. And Georgia is furious because they want it. They want to get rich off of it. They don't want the Cherokee to just sit there and do nothing with it. And so what Georgia will do is they're going to declare that all Cherokee tribal members to be subject to state laws. They're going to say, hey, you got to obey Georgia's law. We don't care about your government. We don't care about your laws. They don't matter. The only thing that matters is Georgia law. You are a Georgia citizen. You live in Georgia. You have to obey our laws. And because you have to obey our laws, we can do whatever we want with you. We're going to take what we want from you. We're going to do whatever we want because you live in Georgia and you are part of the Georgia government, not the Cherokee government, the Georgia government. Well, they are going to transition to a new leader. Sequoyah is going to get old and he's going to be close to death. And so what's going to happen is that a new Cherokee leader a man by the name of John Ross is going to be elected their principal chief. He is going to be their new leader. And so he is going to be coming into an extremely difficult time. Georgia is coming in and trying to take their land. And the Cherokee that are there are trying to defend their lands, not by violence, which Jackson wants to do. They're trying to go about it with civility. They're trying to go about it in good manner. And so, in order to help win their case, in order to help defend themselves, John Ross decides to create a newspaper to spread out across Georgia and to spread out to parts of the U.S. And it's going to be called the Phoenix. What he's going to do is he's going to be writing about what they're doing, how good they're doing, about their government, about how they're interacting peacefully with the state of Georgia, how they're trading with people. They're going to use it almost as propaganda. They're going to be trying to tell people, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. This is our land. We've been here for hundreds of years. We just want to live life. We want to be a part of the U.S., but we don't want to be governed by you. We can govern ourselves. Well, that does not go nicely with Georgia. Georgia is going to be similar to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson likes to use violence, correct. And so they are going to walk in his shoes. They are going to start becoming violent towards the Cherokee. And so what they're going to do is they're going to use something called the Georgia Guard. Basically, they're going to create a militia group. They're not going to be a real military group, but basically they're going to create this group that'll go out, that'll kill people, steal from them, burn down their houses. Basically, they're a guerrilla group, a military group that'll go in and just cause chaos, cause violence, and do all this. And so the Cherokee, instead of reacting with violence, they're going to react peacefully. And so what John Ross is going to do is John Ross is going to go to court. He's going to file a lawsuit against the state of Georgia called Worcester versus Georgia. And what he's going to do is he's going to say, hey, we have every legal right to be here. And it's going to make its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is going to say, hey, we are going to rule in favor of the Cherokee. It's their land. They're not doing anything wrong. Georgia can't go in and just take their land. And so John Ross is going to win a huge victory. However, the Supreme Court decides the ruling, but the president has to carry out the Supreme Court's ruling. And so, since President Andrew Jackson doesn't like the Native Americans, what is he going to do about the ruling? He's not going to implement it. He's going to say, Supreme Court, why don't you try to put it into place? He knows they can't. And so what he's going to do is he's going to tie down the Cherokee Nation. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, I know, but if this image, it's the Cherokee Nation right here, and Andrew Jackson and all his military people and his friends with money are tying them down and are saying, hey, we don't care what you think, Cherokee. We don't care what you think, John Ross. We don't care if you won. We are going to do whatever we want with you. We're going to force you to give up your lands. We're going to force you to obey our laws. We're going to force you to move somewhere else. And so this is where we come to their Trail of Tears. Probably if the most famous Trail of Tears that is known in U.S. history is the Cherokee Trail of Tears. And it'll take place in 1837 to 1838. And so what'll happen is when Jackson says, hey, we're going to take your lands, what he's going to do is he's going to take the tribes, the Cherokee people, he's going to force them in concentration camps, and then he's going to move them out westward by military guard. Where have you heard the term concentration camp before? Chase? That's right, World War II. Hitler used concentration camps to control the Jews. This is where he got the idea. Jackson and his military are going to create concentration camps for the Cherokee Indians. And whenever he wants to, he'll force them to Indian territory. They won't have enough supplies. They won't have good food. They won't have good clothing. And so hundreds will die. Hundreds of Cherokee Indians will die because Andrew Jackson does not obey the law. And so we see that the Cherokee Indians do not have enough time to gather their supplies, do not have enough time to prepare their way, to prepare for this harsh journey. And so we see that it's going to be death and destruction. We're going to see that, it's going to be miles and miles of families struggling. We see, these families are having to bury grandmothers, mothers, having to bury children right here. We're seeing that they are struggling because they are being forced by military. We see some military guard right here throughout. We see that these military people under Andrew Jackson are forcing these Cherokee off their lands to Indian territory. Even though they legally won the court case from the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land said that's their land. Andrew Jackson doesn't care. And so we see that this is their trail of tears. This is their pain, their suffering. This is the evil that is happening before the good. Okay, this is the pain and the suffering that will take place for this tribe. And so with that, we're moving into our next tribe, the Chickasaw tribe. There's not much about them. What we see is that they're going to be drastically different than the other four tribes and their trail of tears. What they're going to do is they're going to see what's happening. And their chief is going to be extremely smart. He's going to say, hey, what we will do in 1832, we will sign a treaty. We'll give up all lands east of the Mississippi. We'll give up everything we have if you will give us money, supplies, and some of the best lands in Indian territory. Andrew Jackson's like, oh, heck yeah. And so they sign a deal immediately. They won't fight. They won't go to court. They won't try to renegotiate. The Chickasaw and their chief are like, we'll do whatever it takes to finish this, to get this out of the way, so that we will not lose a large amount of people like the other tribes have. And so the Chickasaw Indians, they will be extremely prepared. They will have adequate clothing. They will have adequate supplies. They will have adequate food for their journey compared to everyone else. Now, they will still lose some people, okay, during their trail of tears. Older women, older men, younger children. Because it's such a harsh journey, they will still lose people, but not as much as the other tribes. They will be more prepared than the other civilized tribes. And so with that, we head into our last civilized tribe. And so we will look at the Seminole Indians. Okay, the Seminole Indians are led by a man by the name of Osceola. Okay. Osceola and the Seminoles are located in Florida. And what's going to happen is that Andrew Jackson, just like he done with the other tribes, is going to try to tell them, hey, we'll give you this if you move. Well, Osceola and the Seminoles are like, nope, we do not care. We don't care what you think. This is our home. This is where we've been for hundreds of years. We're not going to do this. Now, there will be some Seminole that will take up the offer. That'll give up some of their land. That'll move out to Indian Territory. However, the bulk of them are going to say no. And so Osceola and the remaining Seminoles are going to react differently to Andrew Jackson and the U.S. than the other tribes. What do you think they do differently? Hannah Spurgeon? Okay. Stephen, what do you think? All right. Osceola, he knows that Andrew Jackson likes to use force. And so what he's going to do is he's going to use force as well. Andrew Jackson and the U.S. government's like, well, if you don't move, if you don't leave, we're going to come in by force. Osceola's response, bring it on. Him and the Seminoles are like, we don't care. Bring it. We're willing to fight you. We're not going to go down without a fight. And so we're going to see that Osceola and the U.S. Army are going to go to war. The U.S. wants to remove the Seminoles. The Seminoles are not going to leave. And they're like, hey, come down to our homeland. Bring it. We know this better than anyone else. And so with that, there is going to be a 7-year conflict between the U.S. Army and the Seminole tribes called the Seminole Wars. This is going to be all about taking the Seminole land and moving that tribe to Indian Territory. Well, their Trail of Tears is going to be from 1836 to 1842. These Trail of Tears are going to be for the Native Americans that signed the deal at the beginning of that time in 1836, and then any Native Americans that they capture throughout that war, they're going to ship out west to Indian Territory. They are going to send them to Indian Territory because they're like, hey, we're fine. However, now not all Native Americans are going to be forced out. Okay, we see that a large amount of them are going to survive. There are going to be Seminoles that are going to outlast the war. The Army's going to finally give up, and they're going to remain in Indian Territory. However, there will be some that are captured and that will be forced out to the new territory. And so what we see happen is that when the Seminoles arrive in Oklahoma or arrive in Indian Territory, they're going to have trouble. They're the last Native American tribe there. Oklahoma is packed full of 20, 30, 40 different Native American tribes that are not similar. And you're putting one more Native American tribe in there, they are causing trouble. They are causing chaos. And so we see here is the map. We see, this is when the treaties began. Okay, 1830 Choctaw, Chickasaw 1832, Creek 1832, Cherokee 1835, Seminole 1832 through 33. See that these are the ways. And we see that these Trail of Tears will last a period of time. And so when we summarize these 5 Trail of Tears, these civilized tribes, it looks like this. One is that the forced removal of the 5 civilized tribes from southeast U.S. to Indian Territory. We wanted their lands. We wanted to move them from Indian Territory, from their home to Indian Territory. We wanted their land because they lived on some of the best land in those states. The second one is that they suffered from exposure, disease, and starvation. During their Trail of Tears, during their journey, we didn't provide them with adequate food, adequate clothing, adequate supplies. And so more than 10,000 Native Americans will die because we did not provide them with enough supplies. Most of them walked. Most of them didn't have a chance to ride on a horse or ride in a wagon. Most Native Americans had to walk that treacherous journey to Indian Territory. We see that it was especially difficult for children and elderly because it was during winter. A lot of these journeys took place during winter, and so they did not have adequate supplies to survive this winter. And so a lot of children, a lot of elderly died because of this. There's a shortage of food and clothing. The U.S. were not meeting up their end of the deal. They were not providing the adequate amount of food and clothing that was necessary for them to survive and that they had promised. We also see that for some tribes, such as maybe the Creeks, there were around 25% of their tribe died because of the Trail of Tears, because of this harsh journey, because of the lack of clothing and lack of food. However, there will be some good that comes out of this. We see that during this process, this Trail of Tears, and when they arrive in Indian Territory, there will be missionaries there. There will be people there that will work with them and that will share the gospel with them, that will teach them about the word of God. And so these tribes, even though they're going through some of the most difficult times in our history, some of the most evil things that have ever happened, they are seeing that God is ultimately in control, that God is working for his good, that God is taking care of them. Even though that they're in some of the worst circumstances possible, God is working. God is using this for their good. God is guiding them and directing them. God is taking care of them. And lastly, we see that, these Indians, even though that they had given up everything, that they had finally left, they will still be forced to conform to white man's ways. They will still be forced to become part of this American way. They will still be forced to become like whites. They will still be forced to give up their government and all this. And so we see that this is a problem. But like we just saw in the previous point, God does everything for his good. God will guide them. God will direct them. God will use this for his good. And so we see this is how it comes to an end. We see that God is working everything for his good. And so I hope you guys learned a lot today, and I will see you guys later. All right, bye.